can just juggle things around. Last week you may have heard about an awkward skit that happened on Channel 7's breakfast TV show Sunrise. Featured some of the presenters acting out a mock scene from the TV show or the series Sex and the City with Sex and the City star Kristen Davis. Here's what it sounded like, or a small part thereof.
Wow, it's fabulous. Oh, that's me. Even more fabulous than the first one.
So, Carrie, what was your news?
Oh, Berger broke up with me on a post-it note.
On a post-it note? Carrie, everything happens for a reason. Even if you don't want what it is yet. Even if you don't know. You left out a word, people. Even if you don't know what it is yet. Look at me. If I had never met Trey, I would never have gotten divorced. And then I would never have met my divorce lawyer, Harry. And I would never be engaged now.
And
That's right.
Well, you can see
This is a first, ladies. I just want you to know. I just want you to know I have never done this.
But what did you think of it?
I don't know that this is a great idea, frankly.
No?
No offense, but, you know.
Awkward, I think, is the best way you could describe that. The scene had ramifications for some of the presenters. Sam Armitage was one, and resulted in what could be called a tit-for-tat between her and an ABC journalist, Virginia Housegger. Now, Akane Kanai is a lecturer at the School of Humanities and Social Science at the University of Newcastle and has been thinking about this and has come in to talk about it, the little furore that it has created. And Akane, good to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Especially thanks for coming in early.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very helpful. Now, did you see it happen? Did you see this unfolding from the beginning, or did you come to it after it started to explode on the social media?
Yeah, definitely social media. That's sort of historically been my research. So I always tend to keep quite a keen eye on the Facebook trending news as a source of news. But yeah, that was really interesting. I saw it play out through various video clips and the furore.
So the first thing that happened was whether this was an appropriate skit to do. The Sex and the City star Kristen Davis was here for nothing to do with Sex and the City. She was here for something to do with the United Nations.
Yes.
So she was supposed to be there on the TV show talking about the UN, and it all got hijacked. That's the first controversy, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I'm not privy to Kristen Davis's PR, etc., but it did seem to be a kind of misunderstanding between what Kristen Davis thought she would be there for. She's a UNHCR ambassador, and I believe she wanted to talk a lot about sort of the experiences of women and children as refugees and the sexual violence they face actually as they have to move through those really difficult situations. So you can see there's a bit of a contrast between talking about that and then what is set up. I mean, they did talk about the refugee situation for a few minutes, to be sure, but it sort of came across as almost a sigh of relief when they got to the Sex and the City stuff, the fun stuff, I guess you'd say.
What do you think of that, as far as your research is concerned, and your the way you look at these things from an academic perspective? What do you reckon about that in the first place?
Well, I think, of course, all academics like to say it's complex, but I think it is complex in a lot of ways because obviously refugee policy is a massive issue in Australia. And I think it's something that's really important that ought to be talked about on a gendered level and a global level. But that said, talking about Sex and the City in and of itself is not necessarily an anti-feminist thing. If you think about Sex and the City and the sort of the massive conversation that opened up about women being able to talk about sex on television frankly, between friends, that was kind of a remarkable thing as well, even though it was enacted maybe quite clumsily and in this skit.
Well, I suppose the reason, or perhaps a reason why Kristen Davis is a UN ambassador is because of her role in Sex and the City. And the reason she's on breakfast television in Australia is because she was on Sex and the City. So that's kind of the hook to get the United Nations and the refugee issues onto the agenda. So it's understandable, I suppose, that a commercial television breakfast show is going to go down that path.
I think so, definitely. And let's not lose sight of the fact that, I mean, celebrity activism for, global issues like climate change, the Leonardo DiCaprio, Kristen Davis for sexual violence against women refugees, that's a thing that the UN has decided to do on lots of levels, I think, because they feel that people aren't willing to listen to the testimony of these people, I think, in and of themselves. That's why they need celebrity ambassadors to come forward and say, oh, well, I feel something about this issue. You know me through this show. You feel attachment to me through this show, and therefore I can speak on their behalf, which I think is a bit problematic at times, but, I think that's
this is perhaps one of those times that it is problematic, because it's kind of what they're... So, yes, okay, it's okay that she comes out here to do the UN stuff. It's okay that she goes on breakfast television because of her role in Sex and the City. Then someone has decided we'll do a mock scene. The mock scene wasn't executed well, so that's, philosophical issues aside, there's good and funny stuff, and there's not good and not funny stuff, and this was in the latter category by the sound of it. But then it went on to other things. So where did the whole issue develop from there?
Well, I think it was easy to pick on the skit because it was very noticeably done in a kind of, not very... Oscar-worthy type way, I guess. And then there was an opinion piece written by Virginia Houseseger, who's a news anchor for the ABC, I believe, criticising Samantha Armitage and the rest of the panel that made up the Sex and the City girls for letting down feminism through reenacting the skit, because it was, I think, words like mindless bimbos, etc., were used. So she was evidently quite offended by the skit, which I thought was interesting.
And to some extent, from what I understand, she was also offended by the role that women play on breakfast television, and I suppose by extension on breakfast radio as well.
I mean, I think that's understandable. I think what was sort of unfortunate in the critique that came across, I mean, I think it was quite valid that she said, this important issue of, refugee violence and the experiences that women have through that. I mean, that was definitely silenced, which is, I think that's a valid critique. You can see that happened even though they broached that. But the unfortunate thing was that it seemed that Samantha Armitage really was the main focus of that criticism. And though Houseseger critiqued breakfast television in general, there was not that much mention of Sunrise producers, the whole structure of what you expect of Sunrise. I mean, Samantha Armitage works for Sunrise. That was probably part of, water for the course. That's conditions of her employment to do things that are light, that are funny, that are not too disturbing for the viewers.
We even see this happening increasingly on News Breakfast on ABC News 24 with Virginia and Michael. The promotions for the show and what they do on the show have increasingly been, and we have fun. Yeah. We have fun here too, Yeah. Not that they would ever do a skit like that with wigs and carrying on, but they do. They've actively increased the banter and the laughing that happens even on a news breakfast show on the ABC. So they can, belatedly too, it didn't happen at the beginning, I don't think. It's something that they've certainly emphasised later in the incarnation of news breakfast. But it's something they realise people want in breakfast. They want this kind of element of fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably many studies into that, but people like to feel a sense of intimacy with that kind of recurring television personality, and that's sort of the job of the news. Often, you have a woman and a man there, and they sort of have this kind of pseudo-familial, kind of, feel when you watch it. You tune in, you're familiar with them. If they have jokes together, then that helps increase loyalty. So you can see why techniques like that are being used, even though if it's supposedly deliver something very serious like the news.
I suppose also the easiest way for them to get that humour going in a short period of time is if they rely on stereotypes. So the bloke will be sporty, he'll be hopeless around the house, he'll have feeble attempts at raising kids, the wife will, rather the woman will also, well, perhaps as Virginia, this is where Virginia Housegger was getting annoyed, is the way the woman is this stereotyped portrayal. Often, not always, often. Lisa Wilkinson, I suppose, would be quite an exception, as would Virginia Trioli. They would certainly not take that mantle easily.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult for women in any kind of media, because sometimes I think it really depends on the sort of producer and the type of genre you're in, for example, or, you know, your employer. I guess for Virginia Housegger, I mean, even though you've noted there's increased banter, she probably wouldn't be asked to do something like that, a skit like that, where she put on a wig and then exaggeratedly muck up the script that was given to her. You know, it wasn't as though she was meant to do that perfectly with her friends. It was meant to look amateurish, etc. She was actually, so effectively, I think Samantha Armitage was probably asked to make a bit of a fool out of herself, you know, as part of the conditions of her employment. So, and there's been a real struggle, I think, for women in television and in radio and in any other media field to be taken seriously. And I think you can see that's why perhaps Virginia gets quite, she's almost personally offended by the skit, because she feels that sort of offends against women like her, you know.
So what do we learn from all of this? It's been going for a week now. It's been playing out in print with Virginia Housegger's response, and then back to tweeting with the Sam Armitage response to Virginia Housegger. We've had people like Lisa Wilkinson saying to Kristen Davis, next time you're in the country, why don't you come on a proper show? And we'll treat you right. So it's been going for some time. So what do we learn?
Well, I think that people will always sort of like to focus on things like this as a catfight. A catfight's a very popular sort of thing to tune in on, and people enjoy the swipes. But actually, I think if you look sort of below the surface, you can see some really interesting debates about what feminism is and how, you know, what is serious television and, you know, the kind of things that breakfast television can offer.
It's a fascinating world to explore, particularly if you're interested in studying popular culture as you are. Akane, thank you very much for coming and exploring it with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We didn't put on wigs. We didn't act anything out. I think we've really missed something there. That is Akane Kanai, I do apologise, who is a lecturer at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Newcastle, and has been thinking about all these things that have been going on. Kristen Davis, incidentally, did end up talking to Virginia Housegger, who is a presenter for the ABC TV in Canberra. Here's a part of their conversation.
Australia is making a huge impact globally in terms of their commitment to refugees on a global front, in terms of their support, women in conflict, livelihood building in Congo, in Uganda. You're a major player, and it's really wonderful to see and wonderful to be here and talk about everything that you guys should be proud of on terms of the global refugee.
I do have to ask you about acting, though.
Okay.
You are also an actress as well as a humanitarian.
Yes.
Are we going to see another Sex and the City film?
I don't know.
It's been
I
a while.
hope so. I hope so. You know, people ask me, and I wish I could give like a definitive yes, but I don't know.
Would you want to do it?
Yes. I mean, fingers crossed. You know.
Well, we can live in hope.
Yes.
Kristen Davis, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Just a part of Virginia Housegger speaking to Kristen Davis about, well, both issues, I suppose you could say. Now, 12:30.